right. Shabbaton Shalom.
Shabbaton Shalom.
Hallelujah. We are happy to be back here. We're glad that we're able to celebrate these high holy days that the Most High has given to us. We want to today have a brief, I was saying brief look. We want to look at a few things here in the scriptures. We want to do our due diligence in commemorating these days and times. So we want to talk about a little bit the significance of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, this being the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We want to talk about these days and times because understanding that the Most High has given us these days and times for a reason. When we're able to understand, to fully understand all of the feast days, we look at all of the feast days from the beginning, from Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, all the way up to the Sukkot and the last great day, we're able to see a picture of the complete plan of salvation that the Most High has created for us from the beginning of time. And so we're going to go ahead and look at some of these key verses here that remind us of the times that we're in and see if we're able to gain a little understanding from it. It seemed like earlier the picture was so much clearer. Now it's a little bit grainy. Oh well. All right. We don't want to look at my face. Anyway, let's look over at the scriptures. We're going to go ahead and look at Exodus 13. We're going to read Exodus 13, verse 1, and we're going to read all the way down to verse 16. I'm going to see what we're able to find within these verses that can help us to not only understand the original meanings of these days and times, but also what it means for us today in 2024. All right, so let me go ahead and pull up for us Exodus chapter 13. And if you could read there from the first verse down through verse 16.
And it says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Set apart to me all the firstborn, the one opening the womb among the children of Israel, among man and among beasts. It is mine. And Moshe said to the people, Remember this day in which you went out of Mitzrayim, out of the house of slavery. For by strength of hand Yahweh brought you out of this place. And whatever is leavened shall not be eaten. Today you are going out in the new moon, Abib, and it shall be when Yahweh brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this new moon. 7 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day is a festival to Yahweh. Unleavened bread is to be eaten the 7 days, and whatever is leavened is not to be seen with you. And leaven is not to be seen with you within all your border. And you shall inform your son in that day, saying, It is because of what Yahweh did for me when I came up from Mitzrayim. And it shall be as a sign to you on your hand, and as a reminder between your eyes, that the Torah of Yahweh is to be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Yahweh has brought you out of Mitzrayim. And you shall guard this law at its appointed time from year to year. And it shall be, when Yahweh brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and gives it to you, that you shall give over to Yahweh every one opening the womb, and every firstborn that comes from your livestock. The males belong to Yahweh. But every firstborn of a donkey you are to ransom with a lamb. And if you do not ransom it, then you shall break its neck. And every firstborn of man among your sons you are to ransom. And it shall be, when your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is this? Then you shall say to him, by strength of hand Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. And it came to be, when Pharaoh was too hardened to let us go, that Yahweh killed every firstborn in the land of Mitzrayim, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beasts. Therefore I am slaughtering to Yahweh every male that opens the womb, but every firstborn of my sons I ransom. And it shall be as a sign on your hand, and as frontlets between your eyes. For by strength of hand Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim.
All right, very good. We're just a little bit low def today. Hopefully we're able to be heard. We don't have our fancy microphone capabilities. We just kind of low def. So
Sound good?
if we could be heard, go ahead and put a thumbs up over there, or number 1 or something, so that we could be heard. And, before we go ahead and continue to get started, go ahead and make sure that you share this video. Hit that like button. Okay, very good. I think I tried to turn it up the best that I was able to. Okay. All right. So let us go ahead and go back up here, because we want to pay attention to a couple things. It's interesting when you look at these headings, right? We know that these excuse me, these headings were are of course from the the publishers of the book, but it's as if to say that you have kind of different texts, different subject matter here, but in reality these things are all kind of intertwined with one another, because as it begins in speaking about the firstborn, and then goes off into speaking about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it rolls back into this idea of the firstborn, right? Because these things really are intertwined with each other. All right, so let's talk about all of it. Okay, so when we start off at the beginning, Moshe is told by the Most High that it is necessary to set aside, to sanctify, to dedicate to me all of the firstborn, the one opening the womb among the children of Israel. It's interesting when you think about the idea of the firstborn. There really can be 2 kinds of firstborn, right? There can be, as it says right here, the firstborn, the one opening the womb among the children of Israel, which really is the firstborn according to women, right? According to the woman, right? Because the womb, of course, is the womb man. I just heard the other day that these people were saying that woman isn't really womb man. There's some different kind of etymology to it, and it's not womb man.
Makes sense though.
But to me, I like womb man better. So to me, that's what it means. Hey, sorry. Okay, so it's interesting that we see here the firstborn that is speaking of. It says all that has opened the womb, because when you think about for instance, when you think about Israel, when you think about the children of Israel, of the man Israel, right? The firstborn, well, I guess when you think about, so as far as this goes, there would be four firstborns from Israel.
Oh yeah.
Right, as far as this goes. But Reuben was counted as the firstborn, right? Because he was the firstborn of Israel, right? He was the beginning of the strength of Israel, right? I don't know why you want to say Jacob. I like saying Israel.
Okay.
But he was also the firstborn that opened the womb of his mother. And so it's interesting that here you see kind of the distinction that's made, because it's dealing with the firstborn of the woman. It's interesting kind of from a prophetic standpoint when you think about the fact that I want to double back and talk about Yeshua in this, but since we're talking about this now, we can just go ahead and mention it. When you think about the idea of Yeshua being this prophesied seed of a woman, it's interesting that when we deal with this kind of breakdown of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that it begins with the sanctification of the firstborn, and it's specified as this whole firstborn, specifically the one opening the womb firstborn, where it's connected to the woman, which, kind of has this hint of pointing towards Messiah. I thought that was interesting. All right, so let's keep on going here. And if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, go ahead, put them in the comment section.
Chat.
That's in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. All right, so let's keep on going here. So let's take a look at verse 3. Read again for us, verse 3 there. Nice and loud.
Verse 3 says, And Moshe said to the people, Remember this day in which you went out of Mizraim, out of the house of slavery. For by strength of hand Yahweh brought you out of this place, and whatever is leavened shall not be eaten.
Okay, very good. So when we think about, again, now the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when we look back to the original, because we want to talk about the original first of all, and then we'll get into its prophetic significance. But when we think about the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the literal first day, the first one that ever happened, so they had their Seder meal with their loins girded, right, with their staves in their hands, right, and they ate their lamb. They went to sleep, You know what? I just want to say that, things for me as simple as starting a new job. I'm somebody as a union electrician who oftentimes I start new jobs. Right? There's kind of like an anticipation thing that kind of causes my sleep to be not as deep. My mind is thinking about what kind of people I'll meet and what the foreman's gonna be like. It's all trivial things. But when you think about these people who knew that when they woke up in the morning, they was getting ready to leave Egypt. They was about to go into no man's land. They was about to do something that they've never done before, ever. They was about to be free, and they was about to leave Egypt. None of these people had any idea what was outside of the proverbial walls of Mitzrayim. And so I'm saying all that just to say that, they they ate the lamb, they went to sleep. When they woke up, it was time to go.
I think about vacation even.
I know. We just went on our vacation and it was just like, you went to sleep, but it was like you're just so anticipating this thing. And I think vacation is probably a better picture than going to work, because going to work is it's going to work. But on vacation, it's this thing that you're pleasantly anticipating. But becoming free, that's pretty pleasant. It's a pretty pleasant thing to be anticipating. And so these people, when they woke up, they were going to leave Egypt. And so verse 3 says, remember this day. This day is the memorial of the liberation, the freedom, the deliverance from Egypt. It's the day of deliverance. It's the day of deliverance. Their deliverance was purchased that night whenever the death angel came through and smote the firstborn of those who didn't have the blood on their doorposts. So it was enacted at that time. It's interesting that there was a time of redemption. There was a time of redemption that happened literally when the payment was being made. But it was realized in the morning when they left. It was realized at a time that was different, that was in the future. It was the near future, but it was in the future from when it actually, the debt was paid. Okay, that was just like a little dramatic pause. Okay, so let's look.
It could have been like the debt was paid.
Yeah, let's go right now.
Let's leave.
Let's leave right now. It's paid. We good. But I guess
they wouldn't have been able to get that gold.
they wouldn't have been able to see very well when it was time to borrow from the Egyptians.
They would have been able to count all their gold coins.
I know. They needed that daylight. All right, but let's look at this. Okay, let's look at this a little bit. All right, so let's go over here.
Let me see what Elder said.
Whenever we're going. That's right. When it's time for us to leave, you don't want to wait. You don't want to wait until the daytime. You leave as soon as that thing gets paid, I guess. That's funny. I mean, we got flashlights. We got technology now. You know what I mean? We can, as soon as that debt get paid, you ain't gotta wait till the morning. I'll put my headlamp on if I need to. All right, so let's go over here. Let's go over and look at this here, because it says, remember this day. Remember this day. Okay, when we keep this first day of unleavened bread, we are remembering this day. We're remembering this day of deliverance, right? But what does it mean to remember it? Let's look and see here. That word there is zakar. That word is zakar, right? So that word here, let's go ahead and let's get some more things about this if I can work this together here. We just going ahead and taking our time looking at this thing because we ain't got nowhere to be at. We're right here. Okay, so let's look at this here. Zakar. It is to mark, so as to be recognized. That is to remember, by implication to mention. As denominative from zakar, to be male. That's interesting. Where that seems kind of different. The idea of being male, but the male, right? It's necessary to become a little philosophical at this point when you think about the connection between remembering and to be male. To be male, you're able to perpetuate one's self, right? You're able to cause your name, your lineage to continue and to remain and to be remembered and mentioned, right? And so the idea here with the correlation here is you're making a mark and you're causing a way to be able to think of a particular thing, in this case, this day, forever.
Perpetuate.
Yes, perpetually, right? Continually into the time unknown. All right. And so this day is to be remembered, is to be mentioned, is to be recalled. You're to think about it. You're to think on it. You're to think about the day. You're to think about the things, all of the things that it represents. And it's interesting that here it gives you kind of a overview in this verse, right? Remember this day in which you went out from Mitzrayim, right? So you're remembering the fact that on this day you went out from Mitzrayim. Not only that you just went out from Mitzrayim, but in Mitzrayim you were in the house of slavery, right? And so you're remembering that on this day you went out from the house of slavery.
That's right.
You're also remembering that it was a strong hand that brought you out. And not only that it was a strong hand that brought you out, but it was a strong hand of Yahweh that brought you out of this place. Okay? And whatever is leavened shall not be eaten. Right? It's almost like that's kind of like a extra thing at the end. Right? Where it is kind of a main situation, but it's kind of at the end, it's kind of annexed at the end for whatever reason. But the issue is that when we think about the idea of a zakaring, how you say zakaring in just continuing to zakar, right? You're remembering this day and all of the things that go along with it. And so when we think about it, when we remember it, when we acknowledge it, when we mention it, when we make it be known, oh, this is interesting. Let's look at this. Let's look at this here, because these are all of the things that we're supposed to be doing with this day. Remembering, it's not something just like when you're talking with somebody, you say, remember that time. I could be talking to somebody and we have a common situation. And we could be amongst people that don't share that common situation. And I could be like, remember that time we did that one thing, and then I'll just be like this. And then the person know like what I'm talking about, but we don't really talk about it. But we know what we talking about. I don't think that's what this is here. Because that is not real. You're not really mentioning it, right? You remembering it, but both of you are really remembering it, remembering it in your mind, right?
Like insider.
Yeah, it's like an inside thing.
We just had something like that happen.
Well, it wasn't you because you don't do well with those type of things. Things need to be spelled out exactly, word for word. Like, this is the thing that I'm talking about whenever I make my eyebrows go like this. But I think that proves that you are, in fact, Israel, because you need to remember not just in your mind, but it needs to be brought forth.
Oh yeah.
Right? It needs to be acknowledged and mentioned and made known. Right? And so when we're thinking about this day and this time, we're supposed to remember this time, and it's supposed to be made known by us that the time exists and what this time represents. Okay, so this first day of unleavened bread is to, again, be remembered. It's supposed to be mentioned, recalled, thought about, acknowledged, because this day is, in fact, the day of deliverance. We have to understand that this day really is the defining moment. It's the defining moment of Israel as they become the people of Yahweh. And so it's interesting that when we think about this defining day of Israel as they become the people of Yahweh, wasn't these people prophesied to be all the way back in Abraham's day to Abraham? Didn't the Most High make a covenant with Abraham that was way before Israel as a people? Yes, but it's interesting that it's kind of the same type of situation that we see even with the idea of Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread, where they're kind of not the same thing, but they kind of are. Where the thing kind of starts at one particular time and there's kind of like a lull in between. And then you have it, right? You have the Passover, you have the slaughtering of the lamb, you have the shedding of the blood, you have the coming of the death angel, and then he comes, and then there's sleepy time. And then you wake up and then you leave in the daytime. And so the same idea can be thought of when we think about the idea that Abraham, the Most High made a promise to Abraham these hundreds of years prior to this day. And finally, this thing is being realized. So the reason that the people were considered by the Almighty was because of what happened to Abraham. However, when these people were in Egypt, they were the property of Pharaoh. They were the property of Pharaoh, and they didn't belong to the Most High. They were the property of Pharaoh, and Israel did not belong to the Most High. That, by the way, is one of the significant things that happens at Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, is this transference of ownership. If you say that the people of Israel was already the people of the Most High, maybe he had a thought about the people, but they wasn't his. They belonged to Pharaoh. That's what redemption is. He went and he paid a debt and bought and purchased the people and made them at that time his own. And this is an important aspect that we have to recognize, that the birth of Israel as a people of the Most High, it begins right here. And so this is a pivotal moment. It's a key moment in the history of the nation. And it's a moment that the Most High is telling Moses to tell the people that needs to be remembered. Okay. So, again, as we look here at these verses here, it says, by strength of hand, this was done. Right? By strength of hand. Let's look at that. Let's look at that a little bit. Let me make this a little bit larger here. By strength of hand. By Chozek Yad. Bechozek Yad. By strength of hand. So let's look at this here. Chozek. Power, strength, power, and strength. Right? When we think about the strength of the Most High, it's interesting that one's strength is typically manifest through one's hand, actually. And so it's almost kind of a redundancy when we think about by strength of hand. But we're able to see that the Most High, in a way, if we didn't know what happened, we can see that he manifested himself in a way that was visible, that was able to be seen by all, and that's what the beginning of this time is, right? When we look at the 10 plagues that were enacted here, it's a manifestation of the strength of the Most High. And so again, all of these things are things that we are to remember. We kind of think about these things at the Seder, right? We think about all of the ways that the Most High came and dealt with Pharaoh and manifested his strength to Pharaoh so that we were able to be made free. And so again, we're remembering all of these things at this time. It's necessary. It's a necessary component to, and so I'm kind of saying that you can't really passively celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You can't just recognize the fact that, it's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Yes, it's just a thought. Like, you just can't have a thing that's happening. You can't just think about this day and this time in your mind and acknowledge, like kind of how we do like secular holidays, like President's Day,
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Oh,
we have off on Memorial Day, and so
President's Day. Martin Luther King. No, wait, Martin Luther King. You might do something.
Martin Luther. I mean, all of these things. You kind of celebrate them in your mind.
Columbus Day.
By just remembering. Oh, you mean Indigenous Peoples Day? You kind of think about these things in your mind. You acknowledge the fact that that today is it, but you're not doing anything. Right?
We're forced to acknowledge President's Day because the bank is closed.
Yeah, it messes with your money, But still, it could still be kind of acknowledged in a passive way where you're not doing anything. You're not actively thinking on a particular this or that in regards to it.
Yes.
I think that that is one reason why we could think about this other part that it adds to it in terms of the idea of removing the leaven from your situation and causing there to be this positive action that must be done at this time, kind of to go to the next level of zakaring the situation, where you're actually doing something that's causing the remembrance of this time to be manifest.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you have this positive thing that you're doing, this removal of leaven from your situation. There's an active search for things to make sure that these things are gone, right? There are conscious efforts that are made, that you make to continue in these days and these times that the Most High called for us to be doing. It's interesting when you think about this, it's really the Most High's feast days. They begin with this 7-day feast, right? That's how the feast days begin. And they also end. They also end with this 7-day feast. And so it's interesting when we think about this time when, we think about this idea of getting the leaven out, actively doing a thing, and this all being connected with this idea of this day of redemption, this day of deliverance, this memorial that we remember. These 7 days, right? 7, if we think about it, is the completion. It's the completion of a cycle, right? Wow.
How long was it?
I said some of the most profound things that could have been said.
2
And-
minutes now.
And then I was muted the whole time because of Yosef. Thank you. What I was saying was, I was freestyling, so I don't even hardly remember what I was saying. I said that when we think about the idea of removing the leaven, when we think about the idea of removing the leaven from our lives, we're doing it during this 7-day cycle, right? And 7 being the completion of a cycle is being the idea of removing sin from your life in a cyclical manner. You're starting this new life.
Yep.
It's a new life. And so when we do this thing for a week, we kind of exemplify what our new life is going to be like. This life that is no longer a life that is subject to that old master, because we were bought by a new master. And so we have this new life that's not our own. And again, this is a thing that we think about when we think about, again, the idea of this kind of being the start of a new situation, because we are entering into now this relationship with our new master, because he bought us. He literally bought us.
Yep.
He literally paid a price for us.
And he's bringing us into increase.
He is, in fact, bringing us into increase. It's interesting when we look at the verses that we looked at in Exodus chapter 13. as he said to remember this day of deliverance. He said in verse 5, read verse 5 again for us here. Hold on, let me put it over here so we can see it.
Verse 5 says, "And it shall be, when Yahweh brings you into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, that you shall keep this service in this new moon."
Okay, it's interesting because again we see this idea of a separation. We see this idea of a break. He promised these things to Abraham. He made a promise to Abraham. But the thing ain't been manifest until just right now. He's bringing these people out of this land into a land that he swore to your fathers to give to you. He told them, the fathers, that he was going to give you something. And the something that you get is going to be this place that's flowing with sustenance and nourishment and preservation. Right? And sweet preservation. Honey. Right? Milk is nourishment and it's sustenance. Right? And so this place that's flowing with milk and honey. Cows. Is cows really a thing? I guess so. If they had bulls, cows really was a thing in that area. I guess they had goat's milk. But I guess cows, if they had bulls, I guess they had cows. Does that mean there's a lot of cows over there? And bees? And bees?
You at one point had was researching and saying that the it was like dates or something like that.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I really was kind of just being rhetorical, but yes, oftentimes when we think about the idea of honey, it was date honey, a sweet mixture used by dates, which is one of the things that is talked about in Deuteronomy chapter 8 of the things that existed in the land. But I think it's 8, isn't it?
8.
Yes. But the idea, I think, is kind of a metaphorical one, because when we think about the idea of this land flowing with milk and honey, I think it has the idea of the things that we get from milk, or anything gets from milk. It's a nurturing thing, right? It's a thing of the things that are necessary for your growth are received and will be received by you. And the overabundance of sweetness and goodness and preservation is also provided. It's interesting when we think about the Torah portion that we were just in the previous week. It talked about the fact that offerings were not to have yeast or honey, because honey can actually act kind of as this preservative, right? And so when we're thinking, it's like this additive of sweetness and abundance that's being added, and as far as sacrifices are concerned, it's kind of we're giving kind of the natural essence of the thing, and not elevating it and not swelling it and not causing it to be enhanced,
Yeah.
except by salt, of course.
Oh yeah.
All right, I'm going off on a tangent. All right, I want to get to verse 9 before I get to going to, because, I could actually talk all day
Yes.
about these things.
Yes.
All right, but I want to get to verse 9. Let's drop down. Let's drop down and read again verse. Read 8 and 9.
8:9 says, "And you shall inform your son in that day, saying, It is because of what Yahweh did for me when I came up from Mizraim. And it shall be a sign to you on your hand, and as a reminder between your eyes, that the Torah that the Torah of Yahweh is to be in your mouth. For with a strong hand Yahweh has brought you out of Mizraim."
Okay, very good. So it's interesting when we think about this verse. It's interesting when we think about this verse because how do we keep this part? How do we do this here? Now, this can be looked at similarly to what we see over in Deuteronomy, when it says a similar thing here, as it talks about binding the law to one's hand and having it be between your eyes. But I think that is interesting when we look here. You have this additional aspect of the Torah is to be in your mouth. And so when we think about verse 8 here, there's a literal understanding of this, and the Israelites came up with tefillin. Right? They came up with tefillin, where they would take the scriptures, certain select group of scriptures, and tie them to their left hand if you were right-handed, and to your right hand if you was left-handed, to your hand, and then also a box, would be tied to your forehead, between your eyes. And so if you thought about this from a literal standpoint, you have something that's literally tied to your arm. You have something that's literally tied to the front of your head between your eyes. But there's an additional portion here that deals with the idea of that the Torah is to be in your mouth. So are you supposed to have some type of mouth thing?
Like a retainer with the scriptures.
Oh yes, maybe a retainer, or maybe you have some kind of a stick or something with scriptures in it. I don't know. I don't know. So I'm saying, from a literal perspective, how do you? Because you could say, well, the first part, the what became of this, in terms of, from a literal standpoint, in terms of the tefillin, that's literal. But then when it talks about the mouth, that's talking. But then talking would be figurative, though. So why isn't the other part figurative?
Because you could think and you could do with your hands.
Well, but
So
that's
you know,
figurative, though.
I'm saying that from the figurative, yeah. I'm saying the figurative is.
Is it both, or is it half and half? Well, this part is a third, so it's 2/3 literal and 1/3 figurative.
I guess that's how they do it, right? But it shouldn't. I mean, I'm just saying.
I don't know. I think if we're going to make it be literal, then this whole thing should be literal, or make it figurative. Which
yeah.
one do you want to think about? I need to strap something to my head. I need to strap something to my mouth. I mean, to my hand, my head, my hand, and I also need to strap something to my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Or this is, in fact, something that is figurative.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about our hand is what we do things with. You know, you do things with your hand. The Most High brought us out with a strong hand. I think He helps us here. He brought us out with a strong hand. However, no one saw a hand coming down and doing anything. Right? No one saw big fingers coming out of the sky and working in these things, but they saw a physical manifestation of the power of the Most High.
Oh yeah.
Right? They saw this figurative situation of the power of the Most High when they saw those plagues. Right? When they saw all of the plagues happen, they saw the strength of the Most High. They saw His hand. Right? And so when we think about the hand, we can think about the way in which your strength is manifest and perpetuated, right? And so when we think about this thing that is between your eyes, that's going on in your mind, right? What are the things that are going on in your mind? In fact, the things that are going on in your mind are made manifest by your hand. Right? Your hand can't move unless your mind tell it to move. The only time your hand move is when your mind told it to move first. Right? That's how this body works.
Oh yeah.
And actually the same thing is true with your mouth.
Yeah.
Can nothing come out of your mouth unless your mind first tell it to come out? In some instances, it's the spirit telling your mind to tell your mouth to come out. But either way, we're talking about the idea of inner workings being made manifest in a physical way. And so when we think about this idea of this day and this time that we're supposed to be remembering and making mention of and considering of and thinking of and causing other people to think of, this verse right here is just saying something that was already said in a different way. When we talk about the idea of remembering, remember in your works, remember in your mind, remember in and through your mouth. You need to have a working knowledge of your deliverance, a working knowledge of the way in which you were delivered, so much so that you're able to actually talk about, think about, and make moves that express the deliverance and the redemption that you received. Let's look at Proverbs. Oh, go ahead.
I just was thinking that if you actually was delivered, and you could have that, like the little eye thing, like what you did, because you know what you went through. But if you are dealing with the next generation who didn't experience it, there has to be more teaching there or explaining there of everything, so that they can actually know what actually happened.
Hold on. I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about. Say that again.
I'm just saying that, like, with the whole making it known through your mouth.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Is that the people who were delivered could potentially remember what happened in their minds. because they experienced it.
Yes.
But the people who didn't experience it, there definitely has to be a mouth type of a thing to explain to them what happened.
Yes.
And I just remember even this past week, me and Ebony, someone had said something to us, and Ebony corrected her and was like, "Yeah, we'll be observing Passover this week," and even making mention of that coming out of your mouth to someone is causing that deliverance to be made known.
Yeah, and I think that's the command.
Mm-hmm.
That's what is being said over here. That don't just think about this stuff in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just make little preparations for your own self that nobody knows about but yourself and the people who's right in your
circle,
in your small circle.
Mm-hmm.
But let these things be known to everybody who sees you all over the place. You're publishing this thing. You're declaring this thing. You're letting this thing be known to whomever.
Right. Hell yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Okay, so let us look at hold on, what verse am I looking at? Proverbs 1. Hold on, let me see what this says in the King James Version. Oh my goodness, it's such a huge difference. Wow, sometimes you just gotta look at King James. Here, hold on. Let me get Proverbs 1, 8, and 9 right there. Proverbs 1, 8, and 9.
It says, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. For they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck."
Okay, very good. So this is an interesting couple of verses here. I guess we're talking again about the Torah instruction, the standard that is passed along by the parents to the children, right? And so it said, "Let it be an ornament of grace upon thy head." It's talking about grace as if it's a tangible thing. It's talking about grace as if it's a tangible thing, as if it's a crown. Right? As if it's something that can be felt, touched, looked at on your head. And chains about your neck. It's talking about these physical things, but it's not talking about physical things. What's that called whenever you talk about it's personification of these intangible things? Grace. Torah. Okay? And so when we think about what we're talking about over here in Exodus chapter 13 and verse 9, let me go back over there. Let me go back to the scriptures version. And thinking about what this verse means for us is that we have to be able to get to a place where, like the ancient children of Israel, were commanded to continue these stories to the people who wasn't able to see and know of these things from generation to generation, from year to year. It said in verse 10 that you shall guard this law in its appointed time from year to year forever.
Yeah.
Eventually you're going to get to a place where there's people who wasn't there. but they're going to have to know the story line for line, blow for blow, everything that happened as if they was there. And so when we think about the fact that that was then, and that was a particular redemption that was created for the physical people that literally went through it at that time. But now we understand that Yeshua actually is the fulfillment of Passover. Yeshua is the fulfillment of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. When Yeshua said to the Pharisees, when you read Moses, you read of me. He's talking about things like this. Let's look over at Matthew. We winding it down. We winding it down right now. I was getting excited about this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Matthew 26. Yeah. Matthew 26 and 28.
26, 28.
Matthew 26 and 28. What's that say?
It says, "For this is my blood, that of the renewed covenant, which is shed for many, for the forgiveness of sins." 29?
No.
Oh.
28. This renewed covenant that Yeshua ushers in on Passover at the time that the redemption of the people is memorialized at the exact same time the redemption of the world happens. It's not a coincidence that of the timing of when Messiah dies. He dies at this time on purpose. And so now when we think about the fact that this time is because the day that he died literally is the day of redemption. And it continues to be the day of redemption. Why would he come out with a new day of redemption? That'd be just weird. But he kept it the same.
Oh yeah.
He kept the day of redemption the same. He elevated it. He made it even better.
He made it even more perpetual.
Oh my goodness. He perpetually made this perpetual thing perpetual. He brought it to new heights.
Yep.
This day of deliverance.
People literally, I mean, I hate to say it, when they celebrate the day that people celebrate, they literally are kind of in a way celebrating the day of deliverance.
And they don't even recognize they doing
recognize
it. They don't even recognize that they a bunch of thieves and robbers. Them people. They sit up here and take our stuff and try to make it, repackage it, be into something else. Mm-hmm. But when you take it outside of the context of what it is, you missing something.
Yes.
You missing something because you don't got the whole context right. Mm-hmm. But the issue is that the fact that this day, that is right now, is the day of remembrance. I mean, of deliverance. Yeah. It's the day of redemption. Yeah. And he kept it that way. He made it from the day of deliverance from Egypt and transformed it into the day of deliverance from not only Egypt, but from sin and the penalty of sin.
And Moray, just it being from a deliverance of a people to being deliverance of all of mankind. It's just like, you know, the slaying of the lamb from the foundation of the earth, and it just seems like the harmony of that within the timeline of humanity. Um, you know, it's just it's amazing.
It is amazing.
I don't even
And
know what
it's
it is.
amazing and it's so appropriate. It's amazing and appropriate. It couldn't have been no other time but right now. Right? Okay, so when we think about the fact that this is, in fact, the day of deliverance, understanding that just like Israel that was redeemed from Pharaoh, that they was bought with a price, that they went from being slaves unto Pharaoh to slaves unto the Most High.
Oh yeah.
We're able to look and see that just like those things was true for them in that way, those things is also true for us in a new way. Look at 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20.
It says, or do you not know that your body is the dwelling place of the set apart spirit who is in you, which you have from Elohim, and you are not your own? For you were bought with a price. Therefore esteem Elohim in your body and in your spirit, which are of Elohim.
Very good. And so this just bears witness to the fact that when we think about the fact that Israel, of course, became the property of the Most High, just like we become the property of the Most High and become the dwelling place of the Ruach HaKodesh, who is in you,
Oh yeah.
right? Which you have from Elohim, and you are not your own because you were redeemed.
Yep.
You were bought. You was something, a price was paid for you, right? And so the Most High cause for this perfect act to be done, to perfectly coincide with the Passover of old. And now we have a more perfect reason to rejoice because the one who is the supreme judge and discerner of soul and spirit has redeemed your soul and made us free from sin eternally,
Oh yeah.
so that we could continue to remember this day of deliverance with our strength, with our hand, with our mind, with our mouth.
Yep.
And not only remember it, but to do things that got to do with it so that other people was able to see it, right? To think about things that got to do with it, that cause you to do things that got to do with it, and to talk about things that got to do with it. Because you're keeping it in your mind, and it's coming out your mouth, and it's being manifest in your hands by the strength of your hands.
Oh yeah.
This ain't nothing but the gospel being spread. When you spread the gospel, you ain't doing nothing but keeping Exodus chapter 13 and verse 3 and remembering the day of deliverance. Because you're spreading the gospel of the fact that people out here is slaves to Pharaoh. They're slaves to sin. They're slaves to their carnal mind.
Yep.
They're slaves to their physical desires. And there's a way, only one way, to be freed from this carnality, from this sin, from this thing that has you trapped and bogged down. And there's a way to receive a new master who made a way for you on this day, at this time, a long time ago. So when we think about, in closing, when we think about this day of remembrance and this day of remembrance of our deliverance, not only do we think about the idea of matzah and, getting bread out and doing this thing, eating these things for 7 days, but we think about this new lifestyle that we've attained as a result of our relationship with the Most High through what it is that the Lamb of Elohim, Yeshua, has done for us, and memorializing the initiation of a new relationship with the Almighty that we're just at the beginning of here at this time of the first day of unleavened bread. It's interesting, just kind of as a ending note, that when you think about the scope of unleavened bread, when this thing that we're doing, this eating unleavened bread at this particular time, like, you didn't even need bread. Like, what's this thing that they come up with this idea of we can't make bread that grows. We don't have time for all of that. So let's just make this quick bread. And this thing ends up being like this representation of our new life. But I think that when we think about unleavened bread, it helps us to understand that, and again, in the scope of things, you're beginning this new process with these things that are included in it that you don't quite have a total grasp of what it means, but you're committed to the process nonetheless. Because Israel at this time, they don't seal the deal until Shavuot. Right? And so it's you making a commitment and getting yourself into something that you don't have full understanding of, but there is a full understanding of the fact that there was a one, the Most High, who saved you from Pharaoh, sin, and whatever it is that he got in store for me, I want that so that I can continue with the one who's freed me. And so when we think about the gospel, that's what it is. You believe that Yeshua came, lived, and died, and rose from the dead and went back to the Father and sent back his Ruach HaKodesh so that you can begin your journey. Don't know what the journey is going to be like. You know there's a destination, but you don't know how you're going to get there. But you're going to get there with his power, through his power. And so it don't really matter what the journey is like, because you already know what the end's going to be like. But it all begins at Passover.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments before we go ahead and be done here?
I do. Something that we speak about every Shavuot is the mixing of the ingredients and the making of something from it. And, the matzah being just some flour and some water, put together really fast and baked. That's taking something and making something with that message, this intentionality behind it. It's making use of your mental capacity, your hand capacity, and then your mouth capacity as far as eating it. But
sharing the recipe.
What'd you say?
Or sharing the
Or
recipe.
sharing a recipe. Yeah. Explaining to someone else how to make it. It's there's an intentionality behind that, and that's something that we talk about every year.
Mm-hmm.
It's that's not new knowledge. It's something that we literally bring out every year.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which is part of what this whole thing is that we rehearse these things, we do these things, we talk about these things over and over again because we want to have these things be not only solidified in our own minds, but be able to have the ability to not only have a total full working grasp of all of these things, but be able to properly and effectively communicate these things to others, because at the end of the day, this is in fact the gospel. Okay. All right. So that being said, I want to ask that everyone have a wonderful remainder of the first day of unleavened bread. Y'all willing, we will be back on tomorrow with our midweek Torah study, and we'll be back after that, y'all willing, on Shabbat for our normal Shabbat service. So until then, we'll say shalom.
Shalom.
Enjoy the rest of your day, all of you.
Oh yeah.